100,000 Americans died from fentanyl last year, and it was shipped to the United States from China. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, reports that fentanyl overdoses are now the leading cause of death among young and middle-aged adults. More than cancer, more than heart disease, more than accidents. In China, drug abuse is punishable by death. Yet the vast majority of the fentanyl in the United States has been illegally trafficked from China. Unfortunately, this reality isn't caused by an insufficient or incapable police force in China that can't trace the illicit production or transport of fentanyl and its precursors. Rather, the Chinese government monitors every movement and statement made by its citizens. They've cast a net of surveillance over their society that is so expansive that Uyghurs can't leave their homes without the CCP knowing. Chinese law enforcement agencies feign ignorance over the distribution of fentanyl, knowing that they're perpetrating a crisis in the United States and claiming more and more lives each year. The Chinese government's gray zone tactics aren't just limited to the illegal drugs they ship into our country. They also steal billions of dollars of technology every year from American businesses. They have responded to COVID in a way that has increasingly harmed the world economy. The Chinese government conducts cyber attacks against the United States. And as we speak, the Chinese government is hinting that they would engage militarily if Speaker Pelosi visits Taiwan. My question to you is, should we engage in some type of asymmetric warfare with China?
Thank you for...
Sir?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that excellent question. I think what you're asking is whether we should avenge...
What I'm asking is are we in a war right now? Nobody wants to call it a war, but they're killing 100,000 people. How is that not a war?
It is an incredibly intense takeover of the daily functions of our society, and that involves, as you say, many deaths from drug imports that could have been stopped. I think the challenge that we have is authoritarian countries don't have any sort of they don't see any ethical obligations for themselves, whereas we as liberal democracies see ourselves as bound by certain ethical considerations.
You're saying they're not doing it on purpose?
They're
not letting fentanyl in this country because they know it disrupts our economy, it kills our people, and it undermines our civil society. It's just by accident that these drug dealers are doing it.
I don't think it's by accident, but I don't think we should avenge like for like. In other words, it would.
How many Americans have to die before we avenge like for like? 1 million?
I think it would harm America if America were seen as illegally shipping drugs to China to kill Chinese citizens. What we instead need to do is to make our society more resilient and punish China in other ways, for example, by by suspending exports. That we are under no obligation to export to China. Our companies can...
How about if we actually mined rare earth minerals in this country as opposed to importing everything? Maybe we could get rid of the left-wing environmental crazies and actually have an economy that could sustain itself and manufacture products here.
I think where we will move, regardless where we will move out of necessity is a division of the world into 2 or maybe 3 blocks, one led by China, one led by the United States, and one possibly led by the European Union, where we will see companies trade much more with friendly countries. And of course, that already has a label. It's called friendshoring, and it's happening. Companies are trying to remove as much as they can their supply chains from China, simply because they worry that if Beijing gets upset with their home governments, they will suffer the consequences by, for example...
Let me ask Mr. Skolman, if I can, if he wants to respond. Are we at war with China?
Well, I think, as Elizabeth has said, there's many ways in which we are essentially in kind of a below military conflict situation with China. I think that that's accurate in the economic space, in other spaces. But I wouldn't say we're at war with China, because I feel like there's so much worse that things could get. When we look at what China might do, when we're talking this week about what might happen in the Taiwan Strait, or what might happen in the year or years to come, when we look at what China might do in the cyber domain, especially against the United States and against our allies, when we look at all these capabilities that China has to unleash a lot more hurt on the United States, I think it's helpful to think of where we are now and how we might be able still to stand up for our interests and our values along with our allies without necessarily going towards a hot war with China, which, as we all know, would be
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting a hot war. I was talking about asymmetric. But I appreciate your being here and your responses. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you.